like to introduce Melissa Nurczynski, and I'm going to read her bio. You guys should all have the speaker bios in your folders, but I will read the one from Melissa. She teaches professional writing, creative writing, and composition classes at Kutztown University, and her articles have appeared in multiple print and online publications, including Newsweek, Budget Travel, Hemispheres Magazine, Rough Guides, and Atlas Obscura. She not only teaches how to write film and television criticism, but she has been a film and television critic for over 20 years. This experience gives her critical insight into the pop culture landscape and how it bends people's minds. So here's Melissa.
Welcome everyone, and I apologize in advance if I characterize any of your daughters or your former selves as an idiot in this panel. We've all been idiots. We all know what I mean by that. And first, before I get into brass tacks, I want to talk about why I'm qualified. Ruth just said, what my technical stats are, but my degrees and my background are in literary journalism, and I am a graduate of Johns Hopkins Narrative Nonfiction program, and our biggest and our sort of moral center in the early 2000s was fighting postmodernism in journalism and saying that facts matter and the truth matters, and even though it's hard to find, the truth has to be at the center of journalism. And I am very lucky. I have never nearly lost my job or even been called out on the carpet for my gender critical views at my university, but I nearly lost my job for saying that journalism matters and facts matter in journalism. I did very nearly lose it during a time when I had colleagues saying there is something called essential truth that is beyond facts. And I said, well, the fact is that would get a journalist fired, and I'm supposed to teach them. But anyway, moving on from that, there is an interesting caveat to that, and something that I studied and I discussed, and anyone familiar with journalism studies will know, which is that you can take a series of facts and write an extremely powerful narrative that is fundamentally misleading. And nothing is a better example of that than the rise in power of reality television, which they film reality and they bend it to create extremely powerful narratives. My late mentor, Dr. Norman Sims, founder of Literary Journalism Studies, and I, when Trump was elected the first time, had a discussion about the power of The Apprentice and how it had bent people's minds. Sorry, never mind that. I thought I'd turn that off. But anyway, so The Apprentice bent people's minds. They created a hero out of a failed businessman and a huckster. And, we're all dealing with that right now. But I think of Norm a lot when I think of how gender ideology sort of penetrated the larger pop culture landscape, when journalists started making heroes out of this imaginary group that had been pretty much invented before all of our eyes in whole cloth. And we could have an entire weekend of the various ways that famous people, social media, celebrity, and various films and movies have advanced this agenda. But the two that I'm going to talk about today are endlessly interesting to me because they never intended to indoctrinate anyone. They just became the centers of it. And they indoctrinated two separate populations. One group that wanted to be gay men, and the other group that desperately wanted to be best friends with them. And and now I'm just going to tell you a little bit about how that worked. So I'm talking about two wildly different shows. They're both early 2000 shows. RuPaul's Drag Race premiered in 2009, and Supernatural premiered in 2005, respectively. Both shows were targeted at a male audience, one gay and one straight. Supernatural was, as I will say later, the male answer to Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Whereas Drag Race, which I'm about to talk to, was initially conceived as a show for gay men. If you see the early seasons of Drag Race, you will see that they barely even understand women as part of the audience. It's filled with a lot of language and a lot of signaling that we are a gay show. It was on the Logo channel. I think some of you probably remember the Logo channel. And those early seasons were just dripping with overt misogyny. The same kind of misogyny that's generally associated with a lot of drag culture, including the term fishy looks. Do you know what that means? Does anybody know what that means? Do I have to enlighten you? Oh my God, okay. So on Drag Race, they're like, if a man looks really feminine and might pass for a woman, that's referred to as fishy because your vagina smells like fish. And they would say, oh, I'm looking like fresh tilapia today, and ha funny, right? And so this was a part of the show. And I come from, my age, I'm Gen X. This was all very interesting to me because I do have a lot of gay male friends. And there was this brief window where a lot of gay men rejected drag as homophobic, that they wanted to express themselves and their femininity. I can see the Gen Xers nodding their heads right now. They wanted to express their femininity, they wanted to express their non-gender conformity without dressing like a woman. We had club kids, we had culture club, we had androgyny. It was a very dark time in many ways, but it was a very free time. At least most of my friends thought drag was ridiculous and made fun of it. Then RuPaul Charles came along. And at first he was a novelty act, right? Nobody thought anything about it. And he was a novelty, a one-hit wonder. And then he did this show, and it gradually wormed its way into people's consciousness. But again, initially women were secondary. But somewhere along the line, they figured out that more women were watching than men, or gay men. It was initially a low-budget failure, but it did hone its styles and narratives. I don't know if any of you remember Project Runway, right? It basically modeled itself after Project Runway. It had the same narrative structure. These men were given challenges to create looks, then they got to model the looks looking like women, and then they would be judged for it and eliminated. And there were cash prizes. And it created hero and villain narratives in the context of those challenges. Very, very, if you've seen Project Runway, you will understand exactly what the show is doing, and you will know exactly how powerful and compelling these narratives are. And it wildly played up the victimhood of the contestants. They all had sob stories about prejudice and homophobia, which were real, no doubt. Many of them came from very marginalized backgrounds, but there were darker sides too. Many of them early on were revealed to have engaged, worked as porn stars and things like that. So creeping, just as it was amping up and getting a mainstream audience, cracks were starting, the dark side that it was sort of attempting to suppress was coming out. And they worked really hard to kind of shut that off to the side. It did downplay, and obviously I'm not a gay man, but I've discussed this with friends, but it downplayed the prejudices within the gay community towards effeminate men. They were always portrayed as these wonderful totems, these wonderful symbols of the community. They were always portrayed as sexually desirable, etc., etc. There is something called the pit crew, and it's these very masculine gay men who would show up in Speedos and flirt with the contestants. And it was, that was built into the narrative. But all along this time, it began targeting a female audience and became wildly popular, and it eventually just whole hog left the logo channel and went to VH1. And you could tell by the commercials on the show that they were no longer targeting men. The commercials were all for female-oriented products, so we knew who the audience was. It heavily exploits the concept of gay men as ideal friends. Early on, she wasn't initially there, but RuPaul's best friend or alleged best friend, Michelle Visage, gets to be the cool girl and a judge, serving as the stand-in for women viewers. She gets to be one of the guys in this context. As the show rose to popularity with straight women, the misogyny remained, the fishy looks, all of that kind of stuff was there, but it was downplayed. It wasn't so overt. I actually had a student write an article about how wonderful the show was, and I asked her, do you know what it means when a look is fishy? And she said no, and I told her, and just like you did. She had no idea. She watched the show, she listened, she absorbed all of this, but the whole level of the show was going over her head. And as far as I'm concerned, the editors and the producers, that was part of the joke, right? A lot of these producers of all reality shows have a certain level of contempt for their own audience. That's not unusual, it's not different. Anyway, at this same time, this is really interesting to me. RuPaul appeared in media claiming drag was a parody of feminine tropes and not women. He, and I always say he needn't have bothered. Female fans were so in love with the show, they didn't even see a problem to be addressed. If you listen to his Fresh Air interview, you can tell he has been prepped for accusations of misogyny. And he's genuinely trying, I don't know if he believes that or not. I really don't. He's a very, if you've ever listened to him outside of the show in any interviews, he's clearly a very intelligent man. He's a very thoughtful man. And maybe he's talked himself into that. And it's interesting that he himself has always said that he hates doing drag and that he doesn't like doing it and that it's a job. And you see that there are certain gay men who have been pigeonholed into doing drag because there are no other opportunities for them. That's true, and RuPaul is one of them. The great success of the show led RuPaul to get a big deal with Netflix to do a narrative show where he was the star of the show. It was called AJ and the Queen. Has anybody seen it? Probably not, because it only lasted one scene, and bless his heart, he cannot act his way out of a paper bag. And you can feel him. I watched a few episodes and I could just feel him. I won't have to do drag anymore if this is a success, right? I won't have to do the reality show if this is a success. But he is a personality, he is a charming person, but he's not a particularly good singer or good actor. So this is how he's made his fortune, for better or worse. But it's interesting, at the same time, women were adopting the show. The show's use of terms like tranny and the show's refusal to let men on hormones compete resulted in RuPaul being labeled a transphobe and suffering blistering criticisms. There was all sorts of, rumors online that he had to have bodyguards, plots to kill him, and replace him with a trans woman. All of these were rumors or just things flying around the fandom, which is very young. Probably not a lot of it true and a lot of spitballing, but he was very, very much labeled a transphobe for not allowing trans women to compete on the show. And his position was, this is a game show, we're giving away real money. If you are a woman, you are not a drag queen. which seemed simple and logical enough. And I don't even want to repeat the narrative or the mental gymnastics that the TRAs went through to explain something tradition, something we're allowed to compete because we say so, even though we're women and not drag queens, but women. It went around in circles for years. He held the line for many, many years, and I think he finally just gave up. But blistering criticism. But what is, again, fascinating to me, this did not harm the show's popularity among queer and trans viewers. They still were super fans of it. They still loved it. But much like a lot of people have to point out that they hate J.K. Rowling but love Harry Potter, the same kind of rhetoric was going on online. We hate RuPaul. RuPaul is a transphobe. RuPaul is a monster. RuPaul doesn't deserve to be in the queer community. But we love the show. You know, that went on over and over again. I talked about powerful narratives. I haven't watched every season, but I did watch a few of the seasons, and I always noticed there was always one story of a contestant bragging about seducing a straight man away from a woman, because we all know who the superior women are. And then Michelle Visage and the other women involved in the show laugh along and say, of course they really want you, and all this kind of stuff. But the underlying message is, these are a superior form of woman. And if you're a cool girl, you'll know it. And they're your friends, and you want to be their friends because you don't want to be one of those dumb girls who loses her boyfriend to one of these beautiful women. You know, this, and kind of like, it's just like, it was just, I found it off-putting, and you know, again, part of the misogyny, but you know, shut up and take it, because if not, you're a transphobe, you're a homophobe. If you don't accept the idea that your husband really wants sex with me, you're obviously a bigot, you know. That kind of like, just crass manipulation of real problems. But that was heavily embedded into the narratives of the show, right? There was always this constant aggressive theme that these men are more attractive than so-called cis women, air quotes, and the self-aware and cool women know it, right? So that's a big part of the show. No, they really are your friends. And they created celebrities like Trixie and Katja, men in dresses who promise they are better women than you and your best friend at the same time. And they are the victims here, remember that. Is, what?
I'm just so appalling, sorry.
Oh, wait, let me, I have to show you where I found this photo, so I'm just gonna bear with me here. Oh, I have to go. It's the Chromebook, people, bear with me. Strap in. Drag queens Katja and Trixie challenge societal expectations in their guide to modern womanhood. An entire lavish article about how they're going to teach you how to be a woman.
Wait, scroll up for a second.
Sure.
To the top. It's always on Steam. Is that what it said?
On where the show is?
Yeah.
On.
I think it was just an ad.
Yeah.
Oh, it's an ad. Yeah, no. And so, yeah. I think their show's on Netflix. And they have a little Netflix review show where they react to things. And I can tell you that a certain part of my female students are super fans of these guys. They just want to be their best friends. They think they're wonderful. They think that they're the victims of all the oppression in the world, and they're the ones who have an obligation to support them in everything they do whatever they say, and they believe that this is an equal friendship of some kind. But they've been known to take the mask off and tell women, especially women who might have a problem with drag in any way, what they think of them. And you know the words they used, right? So So that's RuPaul's Drag Race, right? Here, there. And so, there's our third.
This girl's straight.
Yeah, this is mostly straight girls. Yeah, almost exclusively. Oh, there's some now. Like so, there. We'll go for it. Now we're going to talk about. It's a little bit more complicated when it comes to Supernatural, because the Supernatural fans are non-gender conforming. Some of them are straight, some of them are not. It's sometimes difficult to tell. So we'll go back through here. So Supernatural, again, was conceived as Buffy for boys. It initially started on the WDB. That's how long ago. The WDB was a 90s channel that had Buffy the Vampire Slayer and other sort of teen shows. It combined with the UPN to become the CW, known for the Arrowverse and Reign and it lost Buffy, but you know, supernatural, sort of cheap, low-budget horror shows at teens. The literal elevator pitch for Supernatural was Buffy for boys. If you have never seen it, the character's a little older. It follows two brothers who fight demons with guns, and every week they meet a damsel in distress who has a very curvaceous figure. She always has a tank top on and very nice boobs, and she always needs their help. It's basically the first 5 seasons of the show, and they save the girl, right? It is really, really, really targeted at men. The writers, creators, there were a couple of straight female writers early on, but the writers, creators, directors, producers, cameramen were all men, and all straight men. They never thought that women would be anything other than a minor part of its audience. I just want to say it's fine. Like, don't blame the show for this. They were doing their job, and I think they were as bewildered as anyone else when a large cohort of trans-identifying females became sexually obsessed with the show. I think they were caught off guard. They didn't know what it was. They didn't know what to do, and they cannot explain it any more than I can. I don't know if anyone can, but that is in fact what happened. It gradually became a sexual obsession for young women. Fan fiction, which is how women sort of interact with fandom and how they take a TV show or a movie and they sort of engage with their sex fantasies. They write them down and they write down stories. Not all fan fiction is porny or sexy or anything, but a good chunk of it is. And Supernatural had two very, very handsome male characters who were constantly suffering these terrible things and showing affection for each other. They're supposed to be brothers, by the way. That's important because the number one ship or relationship in the early seasons of the show was the two brothers. It was called Wincest. So they would write these stories where after suffering whatever they had suffered in that week's episode, torture or all that, getting shot or whatever, the two brothers would realize that they really, really loved each other and were gay for each other, and they would have sex. So yeah, that was the thing.
That was fan fiction or in the show?
Oh God, no, it was not in the show. It was not in the show. So take a deep breath. Yeah, no. But the writers, and that's an important distinction, by the way. I want to make it clear that most of the fan reaction is more of a reaction to the fandom around the show than the show itself. And that's a complicated distinction, but the girls who are pretending to be the Winchester brothers or the Angel Castiel are not behaving the way that they behave actually on the show. They're not imitating the actors. They're imitating how the characters are interpreted in fan fiction. So it's very recursive, as we would call it in academia. There's several layers to this. Because the characters behave like men on the screen, in the fan fiction, they very, very often behave like women.
Sorry.
Yeah. Like, well, I read my first, and I didn't read a Wincest story because yuck, but I mean, I wasn't going to go there. I wasn't going to click on that one, but I did click on a Dean and Castiel one, and my thought was, Jane Austen wants her is in heaven going, this is too heteronormative. Like, stop making this so heteronormative. Like, it's nominally gay, but the narrative structures of the fan fiction stories are, we fall in love, we're forever bonded, and we're going to get married, and one of these men is going to have a baby because one of these men is a omega man / trans man, right? So babies ever after. So it is the most heteronormative narratives being affixed onto this hyper-masculine world. And I don't understand it any more than you do. I don't think anyone does. The writers don't understand it. Nobody. The people involved in it don't understand it. Yes?
Can I catch a thought?
Yeah, sure.
I think that for a young woman who is, let's just say gender confused.
Yeah.
She finds this hyper-masculine show to be a good example for her of how she can portray masculinity, and then gets attached to it, but inside she is actually female, and the female brain is coordinated to have these romance and, that comes,
fair.
Comes a baby carriage, but they're seeing themselves as this hyper-masculine,
right. Yeah, I think that's exactly, yes. Yeah, that's what's going on. And this isn't the only show. Teen Wolf and other shows do this as well. So in season 4, the Angel Castiel was introduced, and fan wars ensued between the Wincest camp and the Dean Castiel camp, the Destiel camp. Very nasty. Internal fighting between fandoms can get very ugly. But Castiel was a non-human character who the actor has said he was playing an angel. He didn't know how to play an angel. He has an autistic brother. He imitated his autistic brother to play the angel Castiel. And Castiel became an absolute obsession. And many of us have discussed this weekend about the connection between trans-identifying females and autism. So that could be a big connection as well. So the Angel Castiel and Dean allegedly were going to fall in love. Well, they didn't, they weren't. It eventually gets complicated. The characters were almost always written as heterosexual until the last season where they tried to pander and it didn't work, and Castiel ended up going to super hell. Because he confessed his love to Dean and immediately was pulled into hell. Yeah, that's how the writers handled this. So the writers knew the fan fiction. They wrote episodes where the characters they wrote a famous episode where the internal universe, inside the universe of the show, the Winchester brothers discover they have a fandom, and that this fandom writes incest stories, and they act disgusted. And this was the writers' way of going, stop this, you're gross, we think you're a joke. But of course, the audience loved it because they were being heard. They had power. And no matter how, and in a few minutes I'll show you the clip of the Becky, the fangirl, who writes the fan fiction, couldn't be more misogynistically portrayed as an idiot. And yet, what they heard was, oh, they know we're here. They're reacting to us, right? So that was interesting, and then the writers, who again were all these straight dudes, right, who didn't understand any of this, and so they kept dropping hints that Dean, one of the Winchester brothers, might be bisexual or a man whore, and that's the kind of word that they would use, right? And they said, well, that'll make them happy. They'll be able to write their stupid stories, and they'll leave us alone. And of course, no. oh, now you're queer baiting. Now we know, Dean. And you know, it was all done in a very, like, we don't know what we're doing. We have nothing. At a certain point when there's a lot of rhetoric around the show, because it was accused of queer baiting, if you know what that term is, I showed the show to one of my gay male friends, and he said, I don't know, this is not gay. There's nothing gay about this show. What are they talking about? I've never heard of a gay man liking this show, because there were all these media stories about how gay men were offended by the queer baiting on Supernatural. And then I turned to, in the physical real world, gay men and said, are you offended? I've never seen an episode. I don't know what they're talking about, because the gay men were not gay men. They were women online pretending to be gay men. Yeah.
Will you switch to the side where we can see the actors one more time? I have one more little micro theory.
Okay, sure.
Also, like, just a thought, and like, you know, this is a little bit stylized of a picture here, but like, if the men actors are kind of like these like pretty men.
Yeah, they're pretty boys, yeah.
Yeah. Then it's easier than for a woman who wants to see herself as a man
Yeah.
to like duplicate that look.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Like, I'm thinking about, like, why was it this show? Why was it this show
Right.
instead of the other possible shows like that?
Right.
Got this, and you know, like, maybe it, like they had
Right.
just a certain look,
Right.
and just a certain masculinity, and then nothing attracts a crowd like a crowd.
Right.
So as soon as a couple, like one or two
Right.
influencers decides this, then you know all the little clones follow.
Right. Yeah, no, it's true. And yeah, they're very pretty young men, you know, who are now middle-aged men. And we could talk to a lot of dark stuff happened in the fandom. In particularly, they didn't want any female love interests for any of the male characters, so they would, you know, bomb the show with negative feedback whenever a love interest was introduced and have the actress fired. And the actress they hated the most was a woman who whose name is Genevieve Padalecki, who married one of the actors, and she's still married to them, and they have 3 children. And the rhetoric online is she was a beard, he's really gay, you know, all of that kind of stuff. Even they are still married, they still have 3 children. Yeah, there was a plot, and it was not real, but there was a plot. They were going to poison her when she was pregnant because obviously she is just a corporate beard and she's keeping him from his true self. You know, and of course, hopefully none of that would really happen. But the actors' wives did have to have bodyguards if they were at conventions. The actors did too, but the wives had more security than the actual actors. So, including the one wife who is married to the guy who played Castiel, who wasn't even an actress, right? She had to have bodyguards. So that's what we're dealing with. The show didn't just appeal to this particular crowd. In fact, Misha Collins, the actor who plays Castiel, said, you know, the majority of our fans were men. The majority of our online fans and the ones who show up to the conventions are the women, but they only represent a minority. The show was popular in the military. They used to send DVDs to the military bases, and you'll see if you watch, there's a parallel plot of Dean and Sam being portrayed as military veterans with PTSD because of all their demon fighting. Military characters are introduced. So they're also, you know, playing to that other cohort of fans. I actually have a story about that. I had 2 Supernatural fans in my journalism class last semester. One was a veteran of the Afghan War, and one was a trans-identified female. And the 2 of them tried to have a conversation of the show, and it did not go well. Because they were watching talk about the esoteric sort of idea of art becomes something based on who is consuming it. Because they were watching 2 different shows, I swear. And I'm sitting here making notes for this talk when I listen to them. But anyway, they did the person as the brother, the Angel Castiel. But again, it's more in line with fan fiction. And the show plays, you know, blistering criticism, just like RuPaul's Drag Race. You are not making them gay. You are not making them gay. You have to make them gay because you're queer baiting, and the media did pick this up. And there were all sorts of interviews with super fans of the show, and it was so funny. You know, it was when even I was just wrapping my head, in 2014, wrapping my head around gay and queer being two entirely different things, because they were like, well, queer fans are so upset about the queer baiting on the show, and I'm like, well, if gay people are upset about this, why are they, interviewing dumpy straight girls? like about how upset and offended they are, because that, even the show, I don't even think, and when you talk about that, there's another element of the show. They heard the fans saying, well, we want representation, so they introduced lesbian characters, and they were resoundingly hated, right? They wanted to do a spin. They were so trying to make this fan cohort happy that they developed what's called a backdoor pilot, where they were going to have a new young group of girls who were going to fight demons, and at the center of it was going to be a lesbian romance between two women. And the network showed it to all the super fans, and they hated it, and it didn't run. So even the people were getting confused about all this change in language and who the queer community versus the gay community, who those fans are. It was all just swirling around in the culture at this time. And the show ran for 15 whole years. There were entire podcasts dedicated to its queer baiting, whether or not they would make Dean and Castiel canon. And in the lead up to the end of the show, literally hours of material online. Are they going to do it? I've heard that they met with the executives and they're planning on doing it. Are we going to get it done? Over and over again. And what they actually did was they did have Castiel the angel confess his love to Dean, and they get pulled into super hell, and then Dean looked confused. So that was how they resolved this entire thing. And of course, nobody was happy. The large cohort of non-online fans who had never been to a convention, many of whom were straight men who had no idea any of this was going on, were just confused by that scene, did not know what it meant, and the super fans of the show did not care for it, because Dean and Castiel were supposed to get married and have babies. There's the actors again, and they still mock this, and they make reference to it all over the show and things like that. And I've got a couple of little clips, and then we can talk. But let's see. It's amazing how long I can talk about this. But hang on. Let's see.
Oh my God. You're...
Carver, yeah, hi there.
You got my letters and my marzipan.
Yeah, yummy. But,
I am your #1 fan. I'm Sam McCurdy Won't.
sorry, you're what?
Webmistress at morganbrothers.net.
Oh, yeah, you're my #1 fan. That's why I contacted you. If you don't want to believe me.
Are you alright?
No, I'm being watched. Okay, not now. At least I don't think so. But I don't have much time. I need your help.
You need my help?
That's right. I need you to get a message to Sam and Dean. Okay?
right? So now you see it, and you can see how much contempt they kind of, and we're definitely trying to message to the fangirls to knock it off, but it had the opposite effect. All right, so yeah, we have 10 minutes. I've been talking a long time. Anybody have any thoughts about any of this? Because I'd like to hear it.
I came in late, but one of the things about the RuPaul, I don't know if you mentioned it, but the scoring system, the acronym used for the scoring, are you familiar?
I in the back of my mind, but yeah, why don't you tell?
It's see you next to.
Oh yeah, I know that. Yeah.
I don't know, like creativity. And
Oh yeah, it's like a charisma, something charm and something. Yeah, but it's kind of yeah. That's charming, right? They're not misogynistic at all. Charisma, uniqueness, charm, and talent. I believe. Yeah, that's gross. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I just want to say I watched that show because I love horror and I wanted so much to enjoy it,
Right.
and I didn't. It just absolutely did not resound with me at all, which was very different because I have very low standards.
Right. Yeah. Well.
This makes it clear to me why I didn't understand it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the first 2 seasons are all standalone episodes that are homages to horror, and that was the audience they were going for. And some of them are good, some of them aren't. They're kind of, originally I believe it was pitched as an anthology series, right? But they did something different. Yeah.
So, last year,
Yeah.
when you did another presentation on pop culture
Yeah.
trends, and I really appreciate the deep dive into 2 particular shows, but you really opened my mind about the role of transgender ideology in anime.
Yeah.
How fixated,
Yeah.
Gen Zs are with
With the anime, yeah, that is true. That it is a culturally dominant form. It is deeply associated with it. There is a split, I think, between the girls who just consume the regular anime and the young men who are consuming the pornography anime. But also, getting back to this, yes, Supernatural did an anime series. It made a few of their, a couple seasons of the episodes as anime. It didn't last, but that shows they understood who their market was. Yeah.
All of the fetishes are coming from there.
Yeah.
But do they? Because they're catering to a small niche group and ignoring their male-dominated audience.
Well, men love anime too. I don't know.
No, I'm talking about with Supernatural.
Oh, I think they were catering to both. Like they were, because as I said, they had all these military plots and they had all these guns and they had all these action scenes and they never gave up having hot girls on it. And they did go to that audience as well. And it was it's almost like 2 different shows were being written and intertwined with 2 different audiences that never interacted. Yeah.
This is a little bit of a departure, but do you know when the fan fiction shipping thing started? Because I can't even let my young daughters Google My Little Pony.
Oh, that's so. And remember how the mainstream media portrayed adult male fans of bronies as these charming eccentrics instead of these weird fetish guys who were writing porn about a kid's show?
Right.
Yeah, that was disgusting. But as far as I know, it really got a hold of during Star Trek. And it started with physical fanzines. It had probably existed before. I mean, you could really talk about every kind of literature being working off other forms of literature going back to Arthurian legends and different writers writing different ones. But Star Trek, Kirk and Spock, the male started, I think, with Kirk and Spock. And what is very interesting is I don't even know, and I don't know if anyone knows, because I offended a straight woman when I said that the majority of Kirk and Spock shippers were lesbian women, because that's what I had always been told. And I got a very, very curt and angry reply that no, it was an empowering thing that straight Star Trek fans were doing. And then I went to one fandom expert and they said, oh yes, no, it was straight woman. And the other fandom expert said, no, it was lesbian women, and it was probably both, I guess, and I don't know, and does it matter? think so. But yeah, I did get a very, very strongly worded comment about it was not gay women who started it. But yeah, the 60s, the first Star Trek fan conventions had Kirk and Spock fan fiction zines, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I come from a place of deep concern for, the grooming of children with these drag queens. Do you have anything to say about the stories at the libraries of reading these drag queens reading to the children?
I don't even want to be on camera describing the first drag show that I saw in person as like a straight woman in the 90s. And let me just say I am well aware they're not children's entertainers.
Yeah.
Because the show was outright pornographic.
Sexualized.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so, and it was a sexual fetish and the idea. But I think one thing I do have to say is the overwhelming majority of people don't know that. And women in particular think this is cosplay and dress up. They don't understand what a fetish is.
Yep.
Fetish has been normalized, it's been joked about. They don't comprehend the dehumanization behind being sexually aroused by a thing versus a person and a human.
Posters all over colleges, like go buck someone's young, kick his butt,
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah, it's and half of them don't really know what they're talking about, you know what I mean? It's the idea of it versus the reality, and that's what I worry about a lot of these trans-identified females going into gay spaces thinking it's going to be wonderful and they're going to meet a soulmate and they're going to bond together and have queer families, and that's not what's going to happen to them when they go on Grindr, right? It's not going to happen. What's going to happen to them? The best thing that could happen to them is that they get ignored, right? And then they cry and go home. That's the best case scenario. That's not always what's happening, right? It's not a world you would want anyone, anyone in. I'm personally, I think sex should be between two human beings who have affection for each other and consensual adults. What?
That means you're weird.
Apparently I'm just too weird, yeah. I'm a conservative fascist or something because I think, vanilla is the finest of the flavors.
Actually, listen, you have a flag. You're demisexual. There's actually a kink for people who prefer to have a romantic attachment to someone they actually like.
Wow, that's actually like you have to specify that now,
Yes.
right?
Demisexual?
Yes.
Demi Lovato sexy.
Yeah. 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 From females, you mean? Well, yeah, they bullied off the actresses, they attacked the wives, the craziest part of the fandom. Fandom has a large, and oftentimes I'm talking about the most extreme example, but yeah, they did not want any female love interest, and they did not want these actresses getting married, and having babies and growing up and becoming adult family men, because then that breaks the fantasy, because I talked about that last year. I talked about how if he's gay, he's not rejecting me because I'm a dumpy 14-year-old, right? He's a victim of oppression, and we're going to be victims of oppression together. It's not that he's fucking a supermodel, an adult his own age, right? Yeah.
I think as far as like the trans mask, male identifying young women who are fans of the show, and you were talking about there was a lot of hostility towards the girls and the lesbians, and it's because these women, they don't want to identify as lesbians. That's what they're trying to escape.
Right.
No, I'm a straight man.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that the hostility
Yeah.
is so.
Yeah. There's so many layers to this.
Outward.
Yeah, there's so many layers to this. And I will go back to, remember in fandom, there are stories of Linda McCartney during the Beatles era, you know, going out and making cookies for all the women who were screaming for her death outside her apartment because she just wanted.
And Yoko.
Yeah, Yoko is still like apparently responsible for every shitty thing John Lennon ever did.
Just real quick about the show, that
Yeah.
like, if there's no love interest, then were they glorify hookup culture with
Yeah, well, there's a lot of hooking up on the show. Yeah, there was. Yeah, so yeah.
A new hottie every week.
What?
A
A new hottie every week, girl of the week. Yeah. All right, everybody. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.